Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. It's great that there's so many of you. And it's really great to see some of you in person, because I know that I've spoken to a lot of people via email and I've never actually got the chance to speak to you in person. So this is about as good as we can get for now. Okay, so a bit about myself. If you don't know, I'm Vanessa. I work at INASP in the Research Access Higher Education team. So I'm the Programme Assistant. We have today with us Kamal Shaheen, who is the Programme Manager for the Research Access Higher Education team, who works alongside me. And we have Ian Williams and Lorna Piercy from Capital Horizons, who many of you will have met from the work with the Leading in the Library work in Uganda, Ghana and Zimbabwe so far. So a little bit background about the Leading in the Library work, as we have also our colleagues from Kenya with us today, who haven't perhaps had as much of an opportunity to be involved in the project so far. So this is a project that goes on for about 12 months. Including including 3 rounds of training in each of the countries involved. So we've so far had the first phase, which I've heard from all of you has gone really well, so that's great. The aim of the project is to be able to deliver a sustainable future for the Library Consortia. So hoping that we can enable you to think about yourselves a bit differently, to think about leadership, strategy, influencing, and how this can help improve organisational effectiveness. So we'll start off with a few introductions. So I've already given mine. So this is Kamal Shaheen.
Hello everyone, nice to see many of you who I already know, and really looking forward to meeting those of you who I've not met. My name is Kamal, as Vanessa says, and I'm her colleague in the Research Access and Higher Education team at INASP. And thank you very much everyone for joining us. It's wonderful to have you here.
We have Ian Williams from Capital Horizons.
Hello everybody, very good to meet those people again. There are some people waving who we've met before, fantastic, wave back, and other people that we have not yet met. So this is a very exciting thing to trial today, and we're hoping it'll go very well.
Hello, I'm Lorna Piercy from Capital Horizons. I'm the Director of Development, and again, it's going to be great to share with those people who I've met before, and very much looking forward to meeting those who I haven't. So I hope the seminar goes well, and I'll be speaking shortly.
Okay, so I'm just going to pop up on screen the agenda for today. Bear with me 1 second. So there we go. So we're going to have, well, we're having currently the welcome introductions by myself. Then Kamal is going to talk about ULab theory, which is an initiative developed at MIT around leading into the emerging future and letting go of the past when learning. Sorry, bear with me. We are then going to hear from Ian Williams about attitudes and perspectives and entrepreneurial mindset. And Lorna is going to complement that with some of the examples from Capital Horizons work so far. We're then going to have some time for some questions and answers and discussion. So if you have any questions during this time, you can always send them to me in the chat box, and then we'll make sure that we come around to these again later. We're then going to hear from some of our partners. So we're going to speak to Teresa Adu in Uganda. We've got Joseph from CLISC. We have Jacqueline from, Teresa's from Carlick. We've got Jacqueline from Uganda. And we've got Jasper from Zulk. And then we'll have another bit of time for some more Q&A and discussion, and then we'll say our goodbyes. So hopefully that sounds okay for you all. Just and then we will get on with this. So we're going to hand over now to Kamal.
Sure.
So I'll pass over to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was excellent, Vanessa, and well done. What a brave new world we're living in, where we can connect across different continents and countries in this sort of way, and sort of share dialogue across different time zones. I think it's wonderful and very exciting, and we're piloting this for the first time. So I think Vanessa's done a fantastic job of setting up the technology, and please bear with us if there are some glitches in the mainframe. You know, we'll do our best to iron them out. I'm just going to share a slide with you all, and Vanessa's going to help me do that. But today I'm going to be talking very briefly about Theory U. Theory U, I think, is a really interesting set of tools and ideas that can help us think more deeply about how to cultivate the entrepreneurial mindset. It's being led by a team that's working out, as Vanessa said, is working out of MIT at the moment, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the States, and it's being led by someone called Otto Sharma, and he's working with various colleagues, including Peter Singer, a very famous thinker who wrote a significant book in the 90s called The Fifth Discipline, which is about leadership and the art of cultivating a learning institution. And sort of connected to this idea of entrepreneurial thinking, in the mid-90s, Otto Sharma interviewed about 150 different people from all sorts of walks of life, but it was thought leaders, it was business innovators, entrepreneurs, change makers, and he interviewed 150 people to try and really get a sense of what are the common themes that lead to quite profound changes in the way that we think and the way that we address problems. What are those common ingredients that lead to profound change, profound social change, profound economic change? And they developed Theory U out of those 150 interviews. And just as an aside, one of the people that Otto Sharma interviewed was someone called Charles Handy. This was in the mid-90s, and Ian and Lorna know Charles Handy very well. So we're very lucky to be sort of in this sort of esteemed company of people that have worked with these change makers. But at the heart of Theory U is it's quite a complicated set of ideas, but there's a very basic sort of principle at the heart of it. That is, they argue that there are two types of ways of knowing, two types of approaches to learning, two types of approaches to cognition. One is based on learning from the past, and they refer to this as downloading. So, you know, when we try to address problems, we try to look at challenges, we often have recourse to memory. What worked in the past? What is it in my prior experience that can tell me something about the issue or the challenge that I'm facing at the moment? And they talked about that as downloading, and you can see at the top of the U in this slide that I've shared, you know, it's about learning from past patterns. So often we have our mental models, our well-worn assumptions, our sort of theories about what will and won't work when we're trying to solve problems, and we fall back on that. And they contrast that with a very different type of learning, a different type of knowing or cognition, which they call learning or learning from the future, which sounds counterintuitive. The future hasn't happened, so how on earth are we to learn from the future? The Theory U is really an attempt to develop tools and techniques and approaches to lean into the emerging future, sense the future, sense what is wanting to emerge, and then respond to that. And at the heart of that process is moving down the left-hand side of the U, and it's about cultivating an open mind, an open heart, and an open will. It's about seeing things from different perspectives. It's about cultivating empathy, so that you don't just see things from your own perspective, but you begin to see things from other people's perspective. And the idea is that as you open your mind, as you engage with more receptive approaches to thinking, more open-minded approaches to thinking, you move to the bottom of the U, which they argue is like it's a generative space. It's a space where intuition and open-mindedness can teach you things about about problem solving. Einstein famously said that you can't solve existing problems by using the same kind of thinking that created those problems in the first place. You need to develop creative approaches, creative thinking. And really, this is what we're trying to do in our Leading in the Library project. We're not calling it a learning lab because it's iterative, it's adaptive. We're saying there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to consortia capacity building, but it's a three-phased approach where we're taking a deeper dive into the local context, working more closely with people, not having any preconceived ideas about what is, what will support the consortia to be more effective organisations, but really listening in a quite deep level, opening our minds and being receptive to what is emerging in those three phases. It's a gradual sense making, which is really quite important, part of Theory U. And then when you move to this open-minded receptive space, the idea is that you then rapidly prototype new ideas. It's about experimentation. It's about rapidly trying ideas and then listening to feedback and responding to that feedback. If something has worked, you scale it up. If it doesn't work, you jettison it and move on to something different. It's about a very rapid cycle learning process, which if you're sufficiently open-minded, it can lead to really quite creative and entrepreneurial thinking. And the idea behind the U is that you start off by rejecting downloading, moving to this open-minded and receptive space, and then rapidly prototyping new ideas. And that, in essence, is what the Theory U is about. It is much more complicated than that, and we can respond to any questions later. We'd be happy to talk about that. But this webinar is an example of rapid prototyping. We haven't done it before. We don't know if it's going to work. We're experimenting with it. We will listen to the feedback, from you guys and see what worked and what didn't work. And then the next time we run a webinar, hopefully it will be, it'll be smoother. It'll be more effective. It'll respond to your needs in more effectively. So we're trialing Theory U as we speak in this rapid prototyping of the webinar. So that, in essence, is what Theory U is about. It's at the heart of our learning lab, and it's also really important for entrepreneurial thinking, which I'll hand over to Ian, and he will talk some more about that.
Before we do that, I'll just stop sharing screens, and I'll just check that we haven't got anyone's got any problems. I feel like everybody is now saying that they can hear.
How many people are there?
Agnes is saying that she still can't hear, I'm afraid. Sorry about that, Agnes. I don't know what's going on with that.
We are recording it, so we can share the recording with people.
It's very true. We are recording this, so we'll share it all later on. Although I guess if you can't hear, you won't be able to hear me say that. Okay, I'll pass over to Ian now, who's going to talk to you about the attitudes of an entrepreneurial mindset.
Hi everybody again. It's so good to have this opportunity to talk with you about an entrepreneurial mindset. So I know that many of you are entrepreneurs in different ways, and some of this will resonate, and it'll be interesting to see what comments come and what does resonate, what doesn't resonate. The approach I've taken to this is to come up with 10 ideas that I think are important for being entrepreneurial, but I've based that on research that I've looked at in terms of other people's top tips, if you like, the 10 top tips of others as well, to cross-reference whether these are relevant. But first of all, a definition of being an entrepreneur. One definition that I read was that an entrepreneur is a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable risk and initiative. So a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, usually with considerable risk and initiative. So my 10 points are as follows. Number one, to have an intent. I think it's important, if you want to be an entrepreneur yourself, to think in an entrepreneurial way, that you need to have a clear intent about wanting to do that. that's often said in, like, Stephen Covey, a very famous management guru, would encourage people to begin with the end in mind. And in that regard, if you have that dream, that vision, that aspiration to be an entrepreneur, then that's important itself. It's a commitment to yourself. So for me, for instance, my career, when I was 25, I made it a clear commitment that I wanted to be an international development entrepreneur. And I've tried to do everything I can since to work around those simple 3 words. Not simple in practice, but simple to have those 3 words. The next thing I think is culture. Number 2 is culture. So I think culture is such an important thing, and it's driven by people. So I think when you're working in an organization, and if you have an influence about the recruitment and the retention of people, then it's important to think about the culture and to surround yourself by other entrepreneurial people. So an organization won't be entrepreneurial unless it's got entrepreneurially minded people. So recruiting and retaining those entrepreneurs is very important. So surround yourself by entrepreneurial people, and then the culture itself will be entrepreneurial. The third part is, I've called it learning. So I think learning, you can work within an organization, but again, if you're trying to aspire to become more entrepreneurial, in terms of learning, how can you put yourself into challenging environments where actually you'll learn to be a better entrepreneur? So for myself, as an example, I've always worked in the not-for-profit sector, my main job, but I've been consistently a non-executive director of a business, and it's an entrepreneurial business that's grown from literally nothing to well over $100 million at the moment. And that's a completely business type of experience, but at the same time, it's really stretched me and helped me develop as an entrepreneur. So I think if you can go outside your comfort zone and work with other entrepreneurial organizations, that will help you to be a better entrepreneur yourself. And that could be a small experience by literally getting a day's experience or shadowing somebody for a brief time, or it could be a longer term experience like the one I've just told you. So that organization I've been involved with for over 20 years, in fact. The next one is disaster. So that's a funny thing to say, but often in my experience, entrepreneurial ventures, often things will tend to go wrong. So how do you treat an entrepreneurial venture when it goes wrong? You could be very sad about it, you could be depressed, or you could say, well, actually, it's a disaster. How can we turn it to advantage? And the Chinese symbol, I understand, for a crisis is also an opportunity. So it's mixed up in the same way. And one famous entrepreneur that I had the privilege to work with always had this saying that you never waste the opportunity of a good crisis. So it's trying to think of that entrepreneurial mindset, not to be negative about things when they almost inevitably go wrong in entrepreneurial thinking and ventures. The fifth word is excite. I think to be excited about ideas within yourself and with other colleagues. I think again, it won't help to be generating an entrepreneurial culture if you yourself are not excited. And I use the word excited very, very definitely, rather than just even enthusiastic or somehow less than that. Excited means that you're going to convey a spirit of excitement. And I've seen many different entrepreneurs in my work in different countries. I think of a person, particularly in Bangladesh, who's a remarkable person who has done all sorts of things that other people would never have considered possible. And part of that is, I think, of excitement. That man is always excited. I think of another woman who is a great change maker in terms of attitudes about female genital mutilation and other things to do with issues in Kenya. And that woman, again, she is excited about what she's doing. She's so positive. She infects other people with that excitement. And I think it needs that encouragement for ideas. Next, I've put the word strategy. And I think in terms of strategy, it's very important to recognize two things about strategy. One is that if you're trying to do innovations or new ideas, there's an investment at the beginning of that period. And that investment means that actually for a while, confidence, morale, productivity might actually dip before it gets better. And so it's like similar to the U that was just explained by Kamal, but actually there's a downward movement before it goes up. That's the investment phase. And then the next thing is when things are going very well, in terms of entrepreneurial thinking, the best way to make a change is not when it's too late, it's actually when things are going well. And again, that's sometimes a difficult thing for organizations to take on board, but actually strategically to bring in new ideas and innovations when things are going well is actually a very good time to lead to greater change. The 7th word I've got is pilot, and that's already come up in the sense of prototyping and piloting new ideas. But I do think that organizations large and small, even if budgets are very, very limited, it's just about trying something, about going on and doing things, taking action, making a difference. And those can be very small things, they can be larger things, but change won't come around unless people have the disposition and the willingness to take a risk and to pilot things, to try things off on a small scale, and then if that catches a light, to make it happen in a larger way. I think of particularly, I had a lot of experience with working with NGOs in Malawi, for instance, that were working on fuel-saving stoves. And initially that technology, it improved over a few years, but it got better and better, and it kind of caught light, but it only started to catch light because people were willing to take a risk in the first instance to try some new methodologies. Number 8 is think differently. So there's 2 words there, but I think again, as an entrepreneurial mindset is about encouraging thinking differently, and that's a good challenge. So for instance, around the word growth, this is something often, particularly those people that I'm speaking to here that are responsible for departments or organizations as a whole, there's sometimes pressure to think about, oh well, we must always grow by being bigger. But actually, for instance, you could grow by being better, or grow by being different. So you don't need to just grow by being bigger, and an entrepreneurial mindset is always thinking differently about all sorts of things, including growth. And that can be an important advantage to organizations and individuals feeling confident and succeeding. The next one I've got is called well-being. In my experience of working with entrepreneurs in different countries, and I'm thinking of a particular, for instance, a group in South Africa now that's in my mind, but they're so passionate, they're working so hard, they're trying to make a real difference. And then it's really necessary for them to take time to look after their own well-being, because the source of any change is going to be if individuals are feeling well, and well-being in a holistic sense, as much as you can, not to keep on a rat race or a treadmill, to take time for yourself and for your colleagues to look out for their well-being particularly, so that you can sustain, to think of it not like a sprint, but like a marathon run. And that will be for success over the medium to longer term. Jim Collins, for instance, who writes a lot about organizations, says that they can go from being good organizations to great organizations, but that often takes years to happen. And sometimes he even characterizes that in his research from 15 years before they become truly great organizations. So if you're trying to be entrepreneurial through all of that time, then you need to keep looking after your team, looking after yourself, to keep that energy level as high as you can. And then my final point is proactiveness. And again, that's Stephen Covey has come in twice here, but his 7 habits of highly successful people. One other one that I'm going to just reference is be proactive, because I think being an entrepreneur and coming up with innovations and ideas, you have to constantly be thinking, how am I being proactive today? How am I being proactive in this hour? And one particular YouTube I was just watching yesterday, in fact, it was a person called Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, was looking at this issue in a world where we're increasingly got social media that's interrupting our thought processes all the time, Twitter, Facebook, our emails, our LinkedIn, etc. And just saying that needs to be just turned off. If you can't, your mind, to come up with those innovations, that creative entrepreneurial mindset, you need to give it a break from all of that. Otherwise you're responsive and your mind is constantly tuned into all of that. So thank you very much. That's me, and I'm just going to hand over to Lorna.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring what Ian said to life a little bit more by giving examples of 2 entrepreneurial organisations, and just say just 3 points on each really as to why they're entrepreneurial. One of them is Capella Horizons, so I hope I'm forgiven for using ourselves as an example. And Ian mentioned taking a risk, and this is a bit of a personal story, but when I joined Capital Horizons, it was 2 months old, and I'd been working for many years in a very stable organisation, and when the opportunity presented itself, part of me was like, I've just got to follow my heart and go with this. And the other part of me was going, yeah, but you know, I've got children, family, mortgage, all those other things. But sometimes it's just about following your heart and doing what you feel is the right thing to do. And obviously 3 years later, I can now say, well, that was the right thing to do. So that was a good risk. The second one I think was really important is around culture, and as many of you might know, we've got a very small staff team at Capital Horizons, and we have 56 advisors. And an entrepreneurial organisation, I think more and more organisations are coming to realise that people are the organisation. So the more time you spend looking after the people in the organisation, the more successful you'll be. And at Capital Horizons, we spend a lot of time looking after our advisors, and again, keeping the organisation small so that we can manage those relationships on a personal level. And the third thing about Capital Horizons I'd like to say is, having been involved with the sector for a long time, the notion of behaviour change is always talked about. And in terms of funding and being entrepreneurial in that way, I think this is critical for the sector, because moving from a position of grant dependency to being self-sustaining is a huge journey. And for a lot of organisations, they say, well, we just can't see how that's possible, but we never charge for our services. We've always been able to deliver them free of charge. However, at Capital Horizons, we have managed to have a model where 75% of our income is from earned income. And so again, it's challenging what you think is possible and what the sector can withstand, because I think the more we push, then the more I think that there'll be more open doors. So that's Capital Horizons. And the other organisation I wanted to talk about was TechnoServe, which is an organisation whose strapline is business solutions to poverty. And again, this is innovative in that it's moving away from, again, traditional forms of development, and saying, how do we encourage people at a very grassroots, minor micro level to actually develop their own businesses and supply chains to enable their products to be successful, and being self-sustaining in that they're depending on themselves and not external support for their incomes. The other area that I think TechnoServe are very good at is the notion of collaboration, and they hold the saying is this: if you want to move fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that for them, that really demonstrates the strength they have in collaboration with their partners across the globe. In doing it together, they can have much more impact than they can by themselves. And again, the point that Ian made about excitement, TechnoServe have a really impressive staff team, but the most impressive thing about them is that they have so much energy and passion and enthusiasm for what they do, and they're top of the class. They do great work, largely because of that infectious sense of positive energy, and I think that goes a long way. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you. I'm going to hand back to Vanessa. Thank you.
Okay, so just see if we've got any questions at this point. I don't think we do. If you think of anything that you would like to ask, either just raise your hand using the raise hand function. If you press participant, you can click that, or you can just type a message in the group chat box and I'll be able to read it and direct that to people. So whilst we've not got anything at the moment, I think we'll go on to hearing from our partners. So perhaps, Teresa, you might go first and just talk a bit about the situation at Carlig, and then we'll talk to people after that. So perhaps we'll hear from Joseph after that, and then Jasper from Zulk, and then Jacqueline from Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to mute everybody else for now, and then I will unmute Tess. Hello, Teresa. Can you hear us? Can you speak
Yes.
and just see if that? Okay, perfect.
Yes,
all right, I'm going to hand over to you now then.
All right, I can hear you.
Great.
Maybe just a little about the story of Carly as being entrepreneurial. Carly has been established since 2004, and so far we have tried to be in business, if I should put it that way. Very recently, we have redone our strategy. In fact, we had a strategy that was a bit big. And after having some interactions with INAPS and, of course, Kepler Horizon, we have made some changes to our strategy. And so we now want to be what we have been able as an institution to develop for ourselves a strapline. And our strapline now is creating sea change. And C actually stands for our 3 objectives. That is sustainability, enhancing access to information, and then advocacy. And what we try to say about this, basically, is that if we are not able to sustain Carly, then we'll not be in existence at all. So as part of our entrepreneurial drive, we actually are putting in place some measures to ensure that we can have Carly sustained. And that is where the S in the C comes from. And then we believe that if Carly is sustained, then we are going to have a ripple effect. Of course, we want to enhance access to e-resources or access to materials for institutions. And so what we are saying is that if we are able to sustain Carly in the first place, then we can go on to enhance accessibility to the various resources. And of course, if we are able to do all these, then people will hear about us. And so we are trying to put these things in place. But I think that when Lorna was talking, she talked about issues of funding. I think one of the issues that we have to grapple with is the issues of funding. Currently, our funding is basically based on the dues that members pay, and of course the subscriptions that they pay. That is basically what we are relying on. But of course, as part of our entrepreneurial drive, we try to organize international workshops. 2 years ago, we organized one international workshops. And I must say that when we organize these international workshops, we are able to raise a little funds because we are able to make some savings that goes back into our coffers. And so we try to organize international workshops. Last year, we organized the second international workshop. And we are hoping that 2018 will be able to organize another international workshop. And then in addition to the international workshops, we are also trying to see how we can partner with other stakeholders in Ghana. For instance, we are partnering with the various institutions that we belong to, as well as partnering with the accreditation board and other institutions that have a stake in what we are doing currently in Carly. And so if we are able to do that, yes, then we will be able to achieve some sustainability. In fact, as part of our entrepreneurial drive, another thing we have tried to do is to acquire a piece of land and then have a proper secretariat currently CALIG is running a secretariat, but it is not a permanent secretariat, in the sense that almost all the people who are working in CALIG are doing this on a voluntary basis. And so we all have our regular jobs that we are doing, and then we are trying to work from our offices. But of course, we have a small office. What we are looking at doing now is to actually have a secretariat, a building we can call this is CALIG, so that maybe one day when everybody comes to visit Ghana, they would have CALIG as an institution. What is going on in Ghana now is that if you have a place like this, you can rent it out, because people are looking for good places to rent out for their various programs. And so we are looking at getting a place where we can rent out, so that we'll be able to raise some funds for CALIG. I think basically these are some of the things we are trying to do to maintain our entrepreneurial drive. Vanessa, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, we can hear you. I think it's just background noise, I'm afraid. We can still hear you though, Tess. You can carry on. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And so what you're up to? Or, sorry to interrupt.
Okay. And so for the future, in fact, CALIG is also thinking of going into consultancy. Because there are a whole lot of other institutions that are being set up, and a lot of them would want to have access to e-resources. I think on Monday, for instance, we had a meeting with, there's a program, I think an INAPS organized program, which was organized on Monday in Accra here. And we are trying to get more institutions to join CALIG. We have talked to the Library of our Parliament, and they are willing to join CALIG because they know that CALIG has something to offer. But apart from that, I think we have the potential to grow. Basically, CALIG has the potential to grow. And so we are trying to tap into this potential, trying to get all the various institutions that are coming up in Ghana. Now, a whole lot of institutions are coming up in Ghana. I mean, tertiary institutions, the educational institutions, almost all our polytechnics are being turned into technical universities. And so we are trying to get all of them to come on board, because of course, the larger the number of members we have, the more funds we get and the more things we can do. And so we are trying to get all these people to come on board. I think that when we had our strategy, when we talked about our strategy, one of the things we talked about is the fact that we are literally crawling now, but we want to soar like the eagle. And so by 2026, what CALIG actually seeks to be is that we want to be a key player when it comes to e-resources, or when it comes to electronic resources. We want to be a key player in Ghana. And then we also want to inspire a continuous and seamless learning for our librarians. And for that, we organize workshops, we organize training activities and training activities in Ghana. And then we also want to have at least 90% of all the tertiary and the higher educational institutions in Ghana being members of CALIG. Because like I said earlier on, the more people we have on board, the more monies we have. And we are hoping that this will help us to strengthen our advocacy. And then it will also help us to raise funds, both from government and then our various stakeholders, to help develop CALIG. We are hoping that by doing all these things, CALIG will be a source of inspiration generally to other consortia. I think I'll pause here. I'm sure there will be questions and maybe some other contributions coming from other people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to now pass to hopefully Jasper, who's not there. He's lost it. Okay, we've lost Jasper. That's a shame. In fact, we'll try and pass in that case to Joseph at Lisk.
Just lost Jasper.
Oh,
I can hear you.
Okay, Jasper is there. Sorry about that. That's fantastic. Okay, bear with me 1 second. There it is. Okay, Jasper, it's over to you now.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. That's fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, I've had to resort to telephone participation because we're having problems, to connect.
Oh, that's fine. It's very innovative of you.
Yeah. So I've been following through, the deliveries that have been made by everybody there. And just to say briefly about the Zimbabwe University Libraries Consortium, our consortium came into existence in 2001 after realizing the need for us to come together and collaborate in terms of sharing resources, sharing expertise within our various institutions, and learning from each other, and making sure that we provide access to our stakeholders, in other words, our clients, who are essentially students, staff, and researchers within our universities. So we had identified those as our customers. And our business is to provide access to knowledge and information to all those customers. So in a sense, you could say that we are a social enterprise in the sense that we are really not for profit. And we have to make contributions, survive on contributions from individual institutions in terms of income that is meant to sustain our operation. We are also voluntary in the sense that we operate from our respective institutions and from our respective offices. We don't yet have a separate business office from where we could transact. This is within our plans so that we can have a secretariat that will have a separate office from which to operate and run most of the business transactions for the consortium. But a major challenge that we have in that regard is that our resources are currently very limited. These are really made up of contributions or subscriptions that come from the individual members. In terms of providing access to knowledge and information, we've been able to do this through the ENAST program, the PERI 1 and PERI 2 programs, and currently the Strengthening Research and Knowledge Systems program of ENAST, which we have used to subscribe to a number of very useful research database platforms that have been found very useful in our various institutions. So in terms of our formative stages and to develop to where we are, we have organizationally managed also to put in place a constitution which guides our operations and which binds our participation and our contributions to the consortium. And we've also come up with a strategic plan. As a business, it's essential to always plan what you want to do and have a vision of where you want to go. So our strategic plan, which developed over a period of time with earlier attempts being made until now, where we're able to revise the strategic plan. So as a business concern, we do have a constitution, and we also have a strategic plan that enables us to do our work. And within the strategic plan, we've set up some work groups that we use to carry out and implement the Zouk activities. We have work groups such as the Bibliographic Services Work Group, the E-Resources Work Group, Advocacy and Marketing Work Group, and ICT Work Group. These are the 4 work groups that drive the activities of the consortium. In terms of measurement and evaluation, I think we still need to strengthen that aspect so that we see whether we are implementing the things that we have set out to do within those various work groups. Some measure of evaluation is done during our meetings, where we require that each work group gives a report back on what they've managed to do and what it is that they would like to carry out in the future. The chairman himself also does some measurement and evaluation in terms of reporting back on key areas that the consortium will be focusing on. So the chairman is also expected to give a report on those main activities that the consortium will be undertaking. The treasurer also gives us a state of the funds report. In other words, a budget, a treasurer's report, which outlines how the consortium is utilizing its funds for purposes of subscribing to electronic resources or any other workshops, holding workshops that the consortium decides to hold. The major challenges that we're faced as a consortium really pertains to coming up with alternative income streams, and I think this is where we want to focus more in terms of growing our business, because if we continue to rely on contributions from our institutions, then we may not be able to do most of the things that we would like to achieve. For example, having a separate office, an individual that will be on Zouk payroll. So we are now focusing our energies towards raising income flows for the consortium. And I think this is one area that we'd like to do things like consultancy services, as mentioned by colleague. I think we will also want to do consultancy strategies. We would like to hold some workshops within the region where we could possibly levy a fee for members to participate. And for that, we are approaching various organizations within the region so that we are given that permission or authorization to hold such workshops. With their blessing, I think we'll be able to mobilize a lot of participants who can come and attend those workshops. We also want to respond to calls for consultancy services, respond to calls for project proposals and see if we could win some so that that becomes one way of raising funds for the consortium.
So 1 minute warning, Jasper.
Maybe I could just conclude and say facing a major challenge in terms of trying to make sure we renew subscriptions to our e-resources, but we're making efforts to make sure that our requests for foreign currency allocations come through, so that we retain and we maintain or sustain our subscriptions to electronic resources. I think that would be one area that we want to focus our energies on currently.
Okay, thank you very much, Jasper.
All right, thank you very much, man.
Okay, so I'm now going to pass over to our colleagues at CLIST. Arnold, you would like to speak, if that's possible?
Oh.
Hello, Arnold, is that you?
Hi.
Hi, would you be able to speak on behalf of CLIST? We seem to have lost Professor Cavulio, I'm afraid.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised he's offline. maybe he has a problem with his bandwidth.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just lost connection.
Yeah, but basically, I think CLISC are also trying to be entrepreneurial. And just as I've mentioned on the chat, we are planning to have international conferences as part of also trying to generate income so as to be sustainable, because we also just depend on the subscriptions and the membership. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry, we're just listening. Everyone else is muted at the moment, just so we can reduce the noise, background noise.
Yeah. So basically, I was just trying to say that something else that we were trying to consider, because I'm also part of the fundraising and advocacy committee of CLISC, and me and my team were thinking of setting up trainings, for instance, trainings on Turnitin, plagiarism, and what do you call it? A repository installation, and then as part of raising money, the consortium, create some reserve in the financial, actually create a financial reserve. So I know it's a bit hectic, because in Kenya, for you to train, you need to have a license and all that. But I'm sure with time, those are some of the things we'll try and do. I believe that's being entrepreneurial.
Committed to a world where knowledge is valued.
That's great, Arnold. Thanks very much for that. I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit about the strategic grant at CLISC as well, and how that has helped so far this year.
Sorry?
Are you involved in the strategic grant through INAS, the activities?
Yeah. Yes.
Tell us a bit about that. That would be quite interesting.
Okay, I know. Are you talking about the workshops?
Yeah, so sort of the activities that you've done so far, because Kenya is slightly different, so I haven't been involved in leading the library project.
Yes, I'm involved, but not entirely. But what I know is that CLISC has organized several capacity building workshops, just to empower people, because we know, I know we've had one for monitoring and evaluation, one for just recently advocacy. And then prior to that, we had strategic leadership. That one aimed at empowering the leadership of CLISC. That's the main executive members. And I think all these workshops are aimed at just empowering the librarians with the knowledge and skills to be able to strategically position themselves to negotiate with publishers, and also advocate for funds within the institutions, and also among other partners. And I believe it has been successful. So far, I've attended, I think, 3 of the workshops that have been organized, and personally, I would say I've learned a lot, and I believe other participants would share my sentiments. Yeah, so I think the program is on course, and we are really grateful to INAS for that.
That's great. Thanks very much, Arnold. Thanks for the very impromptu presentation as well. I know that you're prepared to speak then.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. I know Prof. Kavuli had really prepared, so you caught me off guard.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Arnold, you've done very well at being adaptive and rapidly prototyping new ideas there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm now just going to pass over to everybody to ask if anyone's got any questions. So if you would like to use the raise hand function if you've got a question. So if you click on participants at the bottom of your screen, and then there should be a raise hand button. And then if you'd like to ask any questions, then go ahead and I can unmute you and you can put your question across. Alternatively, if you've got, we've got some questions in the chat box, that's very good. Nazra, would I be able to, I'll unmute you, Nazra, and then you can ask your question directly to Tess. Okay, Nazra, you can go ahead. I think you should be able to speak now. Hello, Nazra. Oh, okay, no problem. Nazra is going to type instead. So, Tess, I'm going to unmute you in response, okay? Thanks everyone for your comments so far. Just a note to say as well that Jacqueline was going to present on behalf of Cool, but she unfortunately lost her connection. But she has sent us a document with everything she planned on saying, so I'll share that to everyone after the webinar, which is really nice of her. Nazra, if you could type your question into the box, then Tess will reply. Ah, there we go. Teresa, you can just speak out loud. I've unmuted your microphone.
Yes, the question is how we plan to get the funds for that. At our recent meeting, we realized that we've been able to build some capital, which we want to use for this. Actually, we have already bought a piece of land. But you know, I don't know about other places, but in Ghana here, land issues are a little tricky. And so we are having a few challenges with that. But for these challenges that I'm talking about, I believe that we would have even started building something on it already. We have done a few investments with the monies we get. I told you already that we run international workshops, and when we do that, we are able to raise a little funds. And so we have been able to do some investments with some of these monies, and we are hoping that we'll be able to use some of these monies to first acquire the land and then to build a good structure on it. I don't know if I've answered his question.
Let's see. Yes, I think you have answered the question. If you've got any more questions, feel free to just pop them in the box. That's right. We also had a question earlier on from Jean, who's also at Capital Horizons, and it was a question for you, Teresa. So maybe while we're speaking to you, we can also add that one. So she was asking, she was interested to know how you're ensuring the sustainability of Carlig through its people by bringing on new volunteers, especially the younger people.
What we are trying to do is to develop younger people, like you said, look out for people who have one skill or the other. In fact, one of the things we realized after our first Leading in the Library project is the fact that we have a good mix of people who have all kinds of skills and abilities, and we are trying to tap into the abilities of all these people. And like I've already told you, Carlig is looking to ensure that about 90% of all tertiary institutions as well as research institutions become members of Carlig. And when we do that, we are looking at over 100 plus institutions becoming members of Carlig. And so eventually we are going to get a whole lot of young people who will be able to take over from the older ones. Indeed, I myself have been groomed, and that is why I can sit here and talk about Carlig. I mean, some years ago, I don't think I can talk about Carlig the way I'm talking about Carlig now. And so just like I have been groomed, we are looking at pulling other people along. For instance, in my, I'm also the head of marketing and advocacy. We have a number of young people in there, and we try to give them responsibilities. We try to get them to do things for colleague, and then we look at their abilities and groom them to take over eventually. So basically, that's what we are doing.
That's fantastic. I have a question that actually follows on a little bit from that. So when you were talking about all tertiary institutions in Ghana being members of CALIG, would you also include more, say, public institutions, sort of like the parliaments or research institutions that perhaps are not quite as traditionally academic, like those type of areas? And have you made any steps towards that? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Actually, CALIG is a consortium of academic and research libraries in Ghana. That is the full meaning of the acronym CALIG, Consortium of Academic and Research Libraries. And so, yes, we have our research libraries as members of CALIG. For instance, CSIR is not an academic institution. It is a research institution. And then VRA is a special library. That's Volta River Authority. They are members of CALIG as well. And I think on Monday when we met, we talked about another research institution which we can get on board. That is the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, GAEC. We are thinking of getting them on board. And there are a whole lot of other research institutions that we are hoping to contact. I know Nina is on is part of this workshop, and I on Monday she showed me a tall list of institutions that she has indicated that we would have to go and talk to be members of CALIG. Yeah,
that's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I think we're pretty much up to time. So Kamal's just going to provide some concluding comments, and then we'll say goodbye to everybody. If anyone does have any more questions, feel free to pop them in the box, or you can send me them later on. We'll send the recording of this webinar around, so you can send that to your colleagues, and we can send any slides or any other information anybody would like. Okay, so I'm just going to pass over to Kamal now.
So just to say thank you very much to everyone for taking part in this. It's been wonderful to hear everyone's voices. As I said at the start, this was very much an experimental attempt to share learning across the consortia. I know we've done it through the regional conference in Addis Ababa, where people physically met, and there's no substitute for sharing a bowl of fufu with another person, you know. But what we're trying to do is share that fufu virtually by connecting in this way. And I think what's really nice about it is that sort of alluding to the point that Lorna made earlier about if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think that's the spirit of what we're trying to do with this webinar. It's about, we're trying to share how you go about cultivating an entrepreneurial mindset. And from hearing a lot of the sort of practical solutions, it's clear that, many people are prepared to think differently and take different approaches to solving some of the issues and challenges that you all share. So it seems that there is a huge appetite and a huge capacity for entrepreneurial thinking out there. And what we will try and do is, draw on learning from this experience. We'll sort of hear your feedback about how the webinar worked. And we hope to make it a kind of a forum where you can genuinely have that dialogue, how you can sort of share ideas through the webinar process. It's been wonderful, and thank you very much to Teresa and Jasper and Arnold and everyone who spoke today and shared their insights. I'm sorry that you didn't get to hear everyone's insights, but hopefully next time we'll have got a bit better at this. We'll be able to provide the space so that we can have even more meaningful dialogue going forwards. But it's been wonderful to sort of get that, to hear the entrepreneurial mindsets that are already out there. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts and reflections on this. Take care.
Okay, so just before we leave, we've got a couple of short polls. So I'm just going to pop these up on the screen. And this basically is anonymous, but you can just give your opinion on how you found today, whether you think this is a good way in which to do cross-consortial learning and sharing as part of the Leading the Library project, and whether you would be interested in taking part in this kind of event in future. So you can just pop your answers into there, that'd be fantastic. And then if you've got any other comments afterwards, feel free to just write those down and send them over to me. And hopefully next time we'll improve this even more. So I'll just give a couple of minutes for people to do that. Please do apologise to your colleagues that lost connection today as well, and pass on the recording to them when you receive it. It's a shame that we lost some people halfway through. Thanks for your suggestion, Richard. I'll bear that in mind as well. Okay, so I'm just going to end the poll now, and then you should be able to see what people have said as well, which is quite nice. So there we go. 93% thought it was very useful today, so that's excellent. Thanks very much. And 100% of you think this is a great platform for cross-consortial learning, and 100% of you would also take part again in future, so that's great. Thanks very much for that. All right, so we'll say goodbye from here. And we'll speak to you all again soon. We'll let you know when the next one is planned. So thanks very much.
Bye.
Okay. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye. Bye.